We're live, and apparently we're live because I am seeing one person, a little button that says live. We'll be live, I think. And you'll see it appear. People are showing up. Hello, everyone. We are live. Thank you so much for joining. Jennifer Jones, all the way from Australia. And we are joining me today here is Lisa Maguire. And you know what, Lisa? I'm not. Hello, David.
I'm trying to find my.
Talking to you. Bill, welcome. We're getting a walk around here with Lisa.
This is very strange. I know why. I just realized
devices.
why. Sorry. Just realized why. I couldn't figure out what is happening. What is happening? There we go.
You and me both.
I got very confused just now.
Isn't it silly?
Oh, okay.
You know, part of what I do here as Projectkin, in my view, is to help give people the comfort to, first of all, know they're not the only ones struggling to figure out where all the buttons and dials going, even when they know.
Yeah.
It can be very confusing as we walk through.
So I just got rid of the other screen because I was like, yeah.
And then there's the 7-second delay, which is
the delay was also confusing me.
I know, and you know it's coming. It still gets you. So again, joining me today, of course, is Lisa Maguire, whom I called on as my brain trust on the subject of history. As we come into a new series that I started talking about. Hello, Jennifer, I see you. I started talking about a few weeks ago in and around Roots Tech, I think it was, as what's going to happen after Stories 250. And this comes in part from my own story of my ancestors' migration and really the experience as an American, recognizing the role my ancestors had as colonists in what we are going through now. Looking forward to this 250th anniversary, blah blah blah. And a lot of what I learned from Stories 250 as we are still moving forward and we'll celebrate. I'll have a post coming out shortly about a celebration for that in July. So what's after that? Well, I got to start thinking about that now. And as I've cast around, oh my goodness, so many different possibilities of ways to handle this. I want to take the best of what I've learned and take some new ideas and roll these all together going forward into ways to tell the stories of our migrant ancestors and the migration stories in the many forms they take. And you said yes. I'm very grateful for that. So first, before we get started, I want to thank everybody joining here. Bill Moore coming in from Rochester, New York. David Shaw in Illinois, though I don't quite remember where. David, I was just thinking about you as I prepare for my own exploration of not 1, 2, 3, 4, but 5 different cemeteries later this month outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana, during the NGS conference, which I guess I'm also going to. Linda to Heather, great to see you joining in from Calgary. And of course, Jane Chapman coming from Wellington, New Zealand. And St. Louis. That's why. See, I'm learning my Midwestern geography a little bit at a time. And you are in Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, you reminded me just how close Connecticut is to New York.
Yes, we're like 45 minutes.
Yeah. 45 minutes takes me to the other side of the bay.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
What do I know? What do I know? So let's get back to migration on the subject of moving. Mm-hmm. First of all, tell me what interests you about this, and let's see where we go from there.
So this is a topic I think is so interesting as such a key part of our family histories. And my interest is always how our family histories are really part of a broader history and can illuminate the broader history. And, when I'm thinking, like, for example, my family and my husband's family were two individuals. They were individuals in this huge two world-changing migrations, right? The migration of the Irish and the migration of the Eastern European Jews. And, when you think of, they were just little specks in this massive, visual, chart of like, you imagine all these people flowing, and these are just individuals in this very massive tidal wave. And I think that's so interesting that we know what part did they play. And then the other thing that I find so interesting is that you can use history to then understand better how your family migrated and why they migrated. So this the two sides of the two
And
different
I'm
ones.
so delighted to hear you put it that way from the get-go. Helps
Mhm.
you understand, by looking at your own story, helps you understand this larger picture of history. I
Mhm.
joke a bit about my own dreadful geography
Mhm.
of the United States, my own country,
Mhm.
where I pretty comfortable jumping back and forth in time zones or whatever else
Mhm.
across the globe, but I just don't have that experience here in the United States.
Mhm.
And and my own interest in family history is in part a better way to understand this country, because I don't.
Yep. Yep.
And I love your description of these waves of migration, and I'm just
Mhm.
visualizing starlings or something,
Yeah, that
reverberations.
was what I was struggling to say. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
those waves of murmurations where any
Mhm.
one family might
Mhm.
have this whole drama that has nothing to do with anything,
Mhm.
but it starts this spin, and often, or maybe sometimes, it
Mhm.
creates spins for others as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whether and all the different little pools and eddies of how these come along. And I've been working on my own family story now, my migration story, my ball of hay story. Um, in part to give me the grounding for this effort.
Mhm.
And among the many lessons in the process were two that come to mind right now. One is the power of a four-word story,
Mhm.
rolling ball. Okay, five, rolling ball of hay. It's
Mhm.
whatever, because it tells you how powerful a story is. So much more powerful than the specific words that you use to tell it,
Mhm.
because it is an idea in my head and I got it into your head. I
Mhm.
just used that little icon
Mhm.
of four words and it's now in your head and you've
Mhm.
got the gist of it. The details kind of didn't matter because the gist of it was enough to convey the larger picture. To
Mhm.
me, it was the way in which my family or my blood
Mhm.
participated in this global thing
Yeah. Yeah.
happened. And it helps me better understand your story of that same global thing, that same way in which you were touched by that same wave
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. And if you pull in the optic a little more and you say to yourself, well, there was this massive migration, but then within that, there were obviously smaller pathways and smaller movements. And, you know, what I think is so interesting is you can find that your family is part of some invisible line. Like there is literally the game really is really to find out what was the invisible ant line that drew your family from this place to that place, because you will find it if you start digging. So I'll give you an example. So I couldn't figure out why my Maguire family ended up in Montreal, because they immigrated after the famine. By that time, most Irish people wanted to go to New York. They didn't, or Boston. They didn't want to go to any part of the British Empire. So, how did they end up there? And of course, and also the fares were lower to go to the U.S. Before that, before the mid 19th century, it was prohibitive to go to the U.S. and it was cheaper to go to Canada, and also you're inside the
Trains.
British Empire, right? So they couldn't refuse you and all the rest. So I'm thinking, why did they? Every Irishman wants to go to Boston, New York. He doesn't want to go to Canada. And then I realized that there was obviously a reason, and of course. How did I figure that out? Well, through trial and error, but one of the greatest things I hit upon was to look at all the obituaries in the Montreal newspapers in a window of time and do the keyword of their hometown. And sure enough, you find all these people in Montreal from this particular town in Ireland, which is not a big place. It's like a medium-sized market town. Its name is Oma.
Ah,
And I'm thinking, how did all these people in Oma end up in Montreal? And then, of course, I look at the J&J Cook line, and I see all these people heading to Philadelphia and heading to New York, and then, but all the people from this part of Tyrone are all going um, to Quebec. And so obviously they're all heading to Montreal. So then I realized you hit pay dirt at that point. You realize there's something. And then of course, once you start digging into the biographies of all these obits of these people, you find out that there was a mafia who controlled the grocery business. And what a surprise! My great great grandfather was in the grocery business. So there you go. Now I mean, and it's just, but you find the ant line, and then you know so
Yeah.
much.
And every ant line has a scent, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There is something that is making it follow that line.
And there's the
Um,
scout, and then the followers, and yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and also, I want to back up to a really important, but perhaps as a historian, incredibly obvious point, is that you're looking at the obituaries in a
Mhm,
place not to find out who died. You're looking at those obituaries to read the biographies of the people
mhm,
who died and
mhm.
where they came from.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
how you see that pattern
yeah.
following it along. In my case, following the scent is what keeps us up at night.
It's
Yeah,
true. It's so
it's
true.
what sends
We
us
all do it,
into
right? We're
the
all doing
rabbit
it.
holes. Nothing on Netflix. Here I go down the rabbit hole. Um, but where was I going with that? In my case, I have there is the journalists. We've had other conversations elsewhere about how journalists seem to be uniquely well suited for this exploration into genealogy and the training of following the facts of the who, what, when, where, why, how. And it dawned on me that as we look at migrations, a lot of it is those same five Y's and H, but then looking at weather, because a lot of it is, what about the people who didn't migrate? Why didn't
Mm,
they?
mm,
What was their maybe I won't go or didn't go until later?
mm,
I have been trying to figure out why in my story of the rolling ball of hay, why my second great grandmother um, brought her whole family. She was recently widowed, and she brought her whole family and her mother all the way across to this new world.
mm,
Wow. Well, I'll go into the story, but a lot of it has to do with what you lose and you need.
mm,
But then it turns out I've been wasting so much time following the paternal side of the family because
mm,
it's my
mm,
paternal second great grandmother. And it's that family that had been in Switzerland for all these generations. Yeah, it had nothing to do with him. It was her and her mother were both from the same small town in
mhm,
the Black
mhm,
Forest, and
mhm,
everybody else had already come. And it was
mhm,
her grandfather who had come 20 years earlier, and then he died 2 years before her husband died.
mhm,
Oh, well, hello. Do you think they were writing? Yeah. Boy,
mhm.
I want those letters. And it never occurred to me to look at obituaries.
Mhm,
Printed
mhm,
newspapers. I wonder. 1853, maybe.
mm.
Yeah, a small town. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
excuse me. Wow. So,
So it's so fun. So it's, I mean, so I think that's so interesting that you can, depending on what, where you want to put your lens, you can either take the bigger picture or you can look at very specific instances of migration and learn something quite extraordinary.
right. So,
Mhm.
what I'm trying to do with the things that Project Kin
Mhm.
does is, as I'm learning from what happened or has been happening with Stories 250. And to me, my mission for everything that I do is about encouraging people to tell their stories,
Mhm.
to talk to each other, tell the stories, pay attention to where it was, and yeah, let that help you connect to the history of your own place, of the
Mhm.
things that you want to pursue, but to give it a
Mhm.
personal perspective and angle. And I think I've already seen how participation in these storytelling effort as a community has helped us all get the stories told, to feel the motivation, to
Mhm.
feel the encouragement of a
Mhm.
community to
Mhm.
go forward, and some best practices in how to go
Mhm.
forward, as well
Mhm.
as, of course, just finding the
Mhm.
answers to things. So a lot of this comes down to, well, what makes that work? What can I do to encourage people to actually get something done? Well, with Stories 250, I had several combinations of angles. Most of all, I let people tell me when they've done, they've published, not on my publication, which, by the way, I thought I would do. That was the original proposal. No, it was a stupid idea from the beginning, so forgot about that one. Instead, publish it on your own publication. I'll help you do that if that's what you need to do, but get that done. And then just
Mhm.
tell me that you did it. And then I put it on my website, and I structure that different ways, like the timeline and the map, and put it on the website and so on. Um so what can I learn from doing? Oh, yes, and then I invited whoever stepped up first to a calendar of, monthly calendar, to have me
Mhm.
host them
Mhm.
as a speaker. And my
Mhm.
calendar is now full, but I'm looking for something special in
Mhm.
July. Stay tuned for that. Um, and that part worked. A part of what worked especially well, I think, was how people discovered new things they hadn't expected by seeing the juxtaposition of their
Mm.
story with
Mm.
somebody else's.
Mhm.
With the case of the American Revolution, it was about having stories. Sometimes there's stories about participation of heroes in battles, but just as often it was stories of the women at home and the
Mhm.
children, or the
Mhm.
story we had last month about the library building, in
Mhm.
what was really the Enlightenment and what was
Mhm.
happening around the world in that.
Mhm.
So I really want to double down on that idea of sharing these stories as a community and learning from each other. Your story of migration from Ireland, I think we'll have some parallels to, I see you, Jennifer, Jennifer Jones, who has told an incredible story. One of the first ones that we had is Projectkin, of her Earl Grey girl
Right. Mhm.
grandmother, great grandmother.
Mhm.
And, the circumstances surrounding the famine and what that led people to do, as well as figuring out what not to do,
Mhm.
in going forward. So, um, the key, I think, to this in this case, I'm not sure the timeline that we did with Stories
Mhm.
250 makes a lot of sense here. No
Mhm.
need to do the same tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But go ahead.
So I thought also it's just an opportunity for people to hearing each other's stories to expand their ideas of how to conceptualize migration. So, for example, you can think about reverse migration. Um, my my family, immigrated to the U.S. and then returned to Canada. Many people. This is like it's not a one way trip, which is the typical narrative, right? A lot of people go home.
Right.
A lot of people had
Yeah.
seasonal migration, which is super interesting. And then there is, people who were supposed to be seasonal and they stayed. So that was the experience. I have one ancestor who was one of the many Frenchmen who went to the Port Royal colony to make some money in the fur trade and go home to France and buy a piece of land or whatever. But he stayed. And, it just, so and also people who experiment. Like I have people in my family who dipped their toes in living in the US and then went home, for various reasons. Sometimes they went because they, didn't succeed. Sometimes it was an experiment and they, it wasn't to their liking and they went home. There's so many other cases where, migration was not necessarily, voluntary. And there's like a spectrum, right, of what is
Right.
coerced, which is kind of interesting to think about, the
There's
push,
forced
there's
and then
not
there's not voluntary. Yeah.
there's push pull, and then there, how much was it, really voluntary, and
Mhm.
so I think when people you hear each other's stories, I think it gets your imagination going, and you start thinking more deeply about the question
Yeah.
about your own family
Yeah.
history.
So I want to make a general, all of you in the audience, I hear you, a general open door policy on this. Right now, between now and about August, I'm
Mhm.
essentially formulating the mechanics of making this work. So just like I did the participation during Roots Tech is the Roots Tech ride along or the All About That Place, there's certain mechanics that I need to figure out to keep myself sane as I make offers to do lots of things for other people all at once. So I'm working on that part. And I think I've got some ideas that can make this all possible. But at the same time, in this case, as you say, there are just take forced migration versus indentured servitude versus slavery, enslavement. You have so many different elements to what makes that work, or even job opportunities and moving as groups of people. And I'm thinking of the the Great Migration. And how can I bring birds of a feather together? How can I find people? I think my assumption is that the greatest value in doing this to the participants, to all of you as storyteller writers and me too, is in finding similar patterns together and presenting those together. And maybe it just means presenting them in the same, so that you read from one to the other. Um, Hashtags are a decade, that's not going to quite do it. That's social media.
Yeah.
And we don't even have access to those that way anyway within Substack. And I think we're looking at something a little bit higher, not higher brow so much, but a little more resolution to bringing these more intentionality to pulling these things together. So I'm envisioning at this point essentially a database. When you submit your story, you're going to pick through categories and perhaps categories with some of you experts helping me figure this out, categories across them. And then based on those categories, display them together on, let's assume a web page. And in the web world, we call this a content management system. And I don't have some fancy database behind all of this. This is just, ordinary tools making it happen. But
So with these categories, would they be like place time, or would they be thematic, or both, or?
Well, both.
Okay.
Because I think place time is sort of necessary,
Mm-hmm.
and time can be in varying degrees of resolution. I'm thinking pretty big
Yeah.
categories like first half, second half of the 19th century, or pre this or post that. And then for thematic, I think this is where it gets a lot more interesting. I would imagine that a single post might get like as many as 8 different kinds of tags, essentially, different kinds of categorizations. But I would have to predefine what the categories are to be meaningful, and then let people themselves, not me, but them, decide which ones they want to be tagged with. And then I need some way to display the sets of articles that are related to, Irish migration out of Ireland or migration into Canada. And the same article may appear in both, but
I see. Yes. Okay.
they won't necessarily.
Yeah.
The point is to have you be able to look at articles together that are somehow related. And maybe I'm just being a little bit ambitious. I think I could do this. I'm currently looking at using Notion, but it doesn't really get complicated. It does. It kind of breaks at scale, but it's not interesting until you get to scale. So we'll
would
see
it
what I
be a
can do.
problem to make it very granular? Like, could you literally, if you have like not infinite, but if you had multiple like column categories or tags or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
you could make it fairly granular. You could really.
The problem
And then,
is the
but
problem I
then,
see with
but then you'd have to decide how to group them to get the.
yeah, yeah. The problem I see with getting too granular is that we don't, and for the first few months we don't have enough scale. Oh yeah, and I think we have to allow for people to submit our. I'm not giving awards here, right? I don't care if the article's been written 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I also, and this is important, I don't care that it's been posted on Substack. I do my own work on Substack for my own reasons,
Mm,
right? And I could go on and on about what those are, but that sounds like a sales pitch for Substack. I don't want to do that.
mm,
If you've got your own reasons, like you've been doing it for 20 years on your own WordPress, that's
mm,
wonderful. I'm
mm,
delighted.
mm,
And, you all can reach out to me, by the way. And if you have some articles you want to send me right now as examples, bring it on. That might be the best way for me to
mm,
think this through. And that's kind of why I've given myself a lot of time to think
mhm,
about it and come up with the mechanics. Because at this point, and you're all telling me this, um, this is too good an idea to walk away
yeah,
from.
yeah,
And so it's worth taking the time to get it right. And also it's worth not overthinking it. It's
yeah.
worth it's worth making a mistake for.
Mhm,
So Stories 250 had a very natural, you know, end. Um and it's also a beginning because in many ways it set up this kind of an idea to try in other
mm,
ways. And part of what I came up with for Stories 250 was this idea of a magazine, a commemorative.
mhm, mhm.
And the response to that has been fantastic. So fantastic that it looks like it's over 400 pages. Which is good, and
That's
I've already
great.
reached out to a heady bunch of them to say, "You know what, guys? I don't think anybody wants us to do this as full color because that's just gonna be way too
Yeah.
expensive." And I'm not buying and stockpiling these. What
Mhm,
I'm doing is publishing these on Lulu and letting you all just
mhm.
come and buy your own.
I've ordered them, yeah.
And I'm not making any money on it, so I don't,
Mhm.
if one sells, like, my heart will be broken, but other than that, it's I'm a startup founder, you can't break my heart.
I think this is so great, and I think it's, as you said, it's very scalable because if it doesn't have to necessarily come from our existing Substack community, right? Because
Yeah.
one of the things about that's got me so excited about this topic is that it's an opportunity to actually hear new voices. Like I have my own little wish list of stories, migration stories that I would love to hear, and
Yeah.
I think they might be people we haven't met yet. You know,
Oh, 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 wait, here's an idea. I can create a database of stories you'd like to hear.
oh, I would totally. Okay, can I tell you a few of them already? First of all,
You hear
I
that?
want to hear more great migration stories. That Isabel Wilkerson book, The Warmth of Other
Yep,
Suns. If
I'll go get it.
anyone who has not read this book, you absolutely, absolutely must read this book. So I really
I'll
want to
include
hear
that in the
more.
notes.
I want to hear
Yep.
more of these stories. And then I would love to hear more about the Indian indenture, like any of the people, all the people, because it's the same story as the Irish, right? They just went all over the British Empire. It's just like I would love to hear more stories like that.
Did you
Um,
hear, which, by the way, and there's a nice
yes,
overlay to this. I'm trying to think of her name.
yeah.
Um, all about that place. So 3 years
Yes,
ago,
yeah.
I got all excited when I saw
Mhm,
the 10-year anniversary for the Society of One Place Studies. And they did, in conjunction with the British Association for Local History and the Society for One Place Studies,
mhm,
they did this 10-year anniversary with 10 hours a day for 10 days. On the hour, they released 10-minute
mm,
presentations about
mm,
topics about place.
mm,
Loved that idea. So I said a
mm,
year later, I'm like, please, 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 can I play too? So that's what started variations of Project Kin's participation in All About That Place. And we'll be doing
mm,
it again this year in October. So there's a nice
mm,
overlap too.
mm,
There's I'll include it in the notes here. We have fantastic, these are genealogy society style presentations with, let me impart knowledge to you. And this one was a study about how to do the research on your ancestor in India, in this case,
mhm,
from the British records,
mm,
because they're very good. Just like the French are great bureaucrats, the British were very good at queuing and record records about, service
mm.
in Britain. Was that the same as family stories about indentured servitude? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Hmm. So let me back up to put a pin in the other point about a database. I can easily create a form where if you would like to see more stories about, you fill in a form here. And then I just have a listing somewhere of these are things that people have submitted. And I'm going to guess that other people are going to look at that and say, oh, yeah, my story's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And
Or I know somebody who has a great
I
story.
know somebody who, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I guess I have to have a way for there's A who submitted it, and then B who says, oh, I've got somebody and I'd like to talk to you. And then I guess they have to come through me because people may not want to put their names out there, or would they? What do you think? Would they want to put their names out? I guess, you know what?
Yeah, just think about it some more and figure out how to
Here's
find
an
the
idea.
people.
Let them put it in as anonymous. It's either completely anonymous or put your name in, or have them contact me.
Yeah, that would be the way to do it. Yeah, that would be the way to do it.
Good thing we can think quick.
Yeah.
You're watching it happen, folks. This is how it's done. So maybe we've accomplished the key objective here. All of you out there, thank you so much for joining today. I know it's a busy day, and I know it's a special day for you. I won't go into that more. But I do appreciate your taking the time to make this happen. Oh, and so David Shaw here has just dropped in a note about the mystery of South Dakota. So for those of you who are in Substack, and again, we have to acknowledge that not everybody watching here is coming in from Substack, and you might just be Substack curious, which is a wonderful thing. But the mystery of South Dakota is that Substack gives us a nice visibility to what states in the United States or what countries around the world. And I would imagine all of you in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you can chime in as to whether it does the same thing for your local region. Does it tell you everybody else by what province in Canada? I don't know that. But here in the US, with so many states, it will pop up and tell us what states. I'm delighted to welcome so many subscribers now, but I can't think. For me, I think it's South Dakota and Vermont. I'm missing. We're all trying.
How is that possible? You must have somebody from Vermont. That just seems
I don't know. I have a wonderful contingent from New Hampshire, but somehow I haven't managed Vermont. Anyway, we all work on it. So I think that's what you were referring to, David. I'm not sure. That's how I would do it. There's why not? My not. Oh, that's South Dakota, isn't it?
You need
Why
some
not?
aggressive marketing on migration for people in South Dakota. Would that be what, Swedes? I guess Swedes when Vermont is tough, he said. Oh, come on. All those French Canadians in Vermont. And New Yorkers. The migration of New Yorkers to Vermont is like a very large contingent.
We're joking, but here's the serious point to that, and forgive the entrepreneur here. But the serious point to that is that you in Connecticut know people from Vermont because it doesn't seem very foreign to you. And you have friends, and your friends in Vermont to me out here in California are complete unknown. And the ways in which we can introduce each other to our friends is the ways in which all of us can achieve the larger goal for where we're heading on this. And David, I assume the Germans from Ukraine, based on your posts, is relating to where your people came from. You bring up another good point here. Maybe in that stories you'd like to see, sort of a prospectus kind of thing, is the general question of, would you care to share with us where your family migrated?
Oh yes, we should do a tally. Yeah.
Oh, I see. His family of, I think what you're saying is his family from Germans from Ukraine went to South Dakota. And in fact, there are these different enclaves of ethnic Germans who lived in places like Ukraine, who then came as communities. And Jane says, as far as I can see, it is only in the US that's broken up into states. Everybody else is just by country. Well, there you go. I think that's probably a deep bias of the development team. who happened to be here in the U.S. And most Germans from Ukraine went to South Dakota in the late 1800s. There you are.
So this is David was answering my question. I said, "Oh, Swedes," because all I know is Swedes who went to South Dakota in large numbers. Wasn't Lawrence Welk from South Dakota? And I think he was Switzerland.
I don't know.
I think he was Swiss, and I think he was.
Was he Swiss?
He was
Well,
Swiss.
so in my family story, I've discovered definitely were Swiss, generations from Switzerland, and they were apparently. Well, my family was following the trail of a generation earlier, who were from Württemberg.
David just wrote and a 1 and a 2.
So did we decide it is South Dakota? I don't know.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. You have to be a certain age to know that.
Or be tortured by your parents. That's the case, maybe.
Yeah. I just see light blue chiffon.
And the foreigners on this thing don't understand. All the Australians are like, "What are you talking about?"
That's okay. That's what YouTube is for.
Yeah, you should do a deep dive into Lawrence Welk. You'll really enjoy it. I'm sure he's the equivalent in your country.
And you may submit your own, because we were all there. Okay. All right. In all seriousness, let's go ahead and wrap this for today. But you'll see what we're cooking in the back room here. And I am, as you can see, very seriously entertaining ideas and suggestions for ways that we can take this forward. And the fundamental goal, I think, is one we all share, and that is to get these stories told, to learn more about other people's, folks who had comparable experiences, and those stories, and that opens up the doors to better understand ourselves, better understand our own stories, and encourage more of our own family to get into it as well. So David,
David's talking about his childhood abuse, where he was not allowed to watch the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. He was forced to watch Lawrence Welk and listen to accordion music. And who were the singing sisters? I can't remember. Oh, we're going to go down the rabbit hole. I better stop.
Okay, folks, stay tuned for the Zoom. It's very early in the morning in New Zealand and Australia, so they're not quite as punchy
silly
as we are here. Might have been Gunsmoke. Okay, might have been. I think it came before Gunsmoke in the afternoon CBS lineup or whatever it was. Or was that just the wonderful world of Disney? Okay, thank you, everyone. This has been great. And we will again chime back in. And I see you, David. I see you. I have slots open.
All right.
Okay. We'll talk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care now. Bye.
Bye.